it's Chris.
And Kirsten.
Welcome to Good Thinking Weekly, the podcast where we discuss the best of the best in brands, marketing, and culture.
Thousands of people, top execs from the likes of Complex, Klaviyo, Walmart, Wall Street Journal, and LVMH tune in every single week.
We run a creative consultancy in GoodCo, so we know what it takes to build a good brand.
Subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast app, and Good Thinking on Substack for more.
All right, let's dive in.
Okay, you're not going to want to miss this.
This is a great episode. It's going to be all about our Good Thinking New York trip, which is an incredible new addition to the Good Thinking family of products. Are we calling that that? Anyway, we'll discuss what it is. Yeah, what we're doing, what the trip is, why it's important for brands, how it could be interesting for you, and go over some really big themes that we saw across all the experiences that we did in New York with the live edition.
Yeah, we really brought the letter to life. And so now we're bringing it to you. Not as good as being there, but pretty close.
Yeah. And you'll also get to enjoy all the bird sounds as Kirsten is in Panama. So it's a sound bath as well as a podcast. So enjoy.
Hello, hello.
Hello, beautiful Panama. Looks nice.
It's pretty beautiful here. I'm not going to lie. Some added soundtrack for the listeners.
Yes, a little bit of bird bath, sound bath by birds in this episode. But it's a fun episode. I'm excited to chat all things New York tour that we did. You want to give people an overview of what we did?
For sure. So we really brought the letter to life. So it was an amazing tour that we did, really outlining all of the different sections of the letter and really bringing to life with one kind of really curated, really thoughtful place to hit each category. And we invited a group of amazing humans to be a part of that, and really took them all across from, I think, 8:30 in the morning, 9 in the morning, through to about 7:30 at night. So it was pretty intense, packed day, and we saw amazing things. Amazing retail, hospitality. Let's see. Let's give the list. So quickly, Printemps. 12 Matcha.
12 Matcha, yes. Food and bev.
Yep. Fashion flossing.
Which I categorize under silvers, but also sport. And, honestly, wellness and beauty. So that one hit on a few things.
McNally's.
Yes, which for me is culture, but also could be categorized under Gen Z. Alpha's basically an amazing bookstore. So, could be a lot of different things there. And we'll talk about why.
Happier Grocer.
Yeah. Again, food, but also really private label, which I think is an interesting, obviously not a category in the letter, but like a big topic that I talk about in the letter.
Yep. Alex Mill. A surprise.
Yeah, with a really fun surprise. We had Mickey drop in to talk about Alex Mill and all the things that they're doing in retail, but, lots and lots of learnings. And I guess today at the podcast, rather than kind of recapping the letter, and if you haven't read the letter, I highly recommend you go read the whole recap because I have insights for every single piece. But we're going to talk about some big themes, and many of those themes were represented at Alex Mill, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Senti Senti.
Korean skincare haul of the century by Kirsten. I mean, I think her bag weighed 20 pounds more going back than it did arriving. So
for sure. Telfar, which is an experience I was so stoked on.
Yeah, really cool retail experience. I also classify this under tech, and we can talk about why, but they have some really interesting tech in their stores that I think really speaks to a lot of different themes, big picture themes, and also cool brand experiences.
Pauline, which I saw for the first time.
Yes. I'd seen it in Paris. You hadn't seen it. And I think is also another example of retail, but brought up some really interesting themes around who you think your consumer is, which we obviously have to talk about consumers and kind of all of that jazz in a bit.
Yep. Speaking of addicted,
which if you don't know Addicted is a Gen Alpha focused retail brand that when I was walking around Soho, kid you not, each person had 5 bags and every single person had 5 bags. So it was by far the most shopped brand while we were there. And we obviously had to go in, but I think again, speaks to some interesting themes that we want to talk about.
For sure. And then Tiny Zaps.
Yes, your Kirsten got 2 tattoos, but actually 3 people on the tour got tattoos, which was super cool. But they are reinventing the tattoo industry, and they're also getting really involved in hospitality in an interesting way by offering tattoos as kind of souvenirs, like with Kimpton hotels, which I think is super interesting. And we can talk about kind of how that ties into some big picture stuff too.
And then landing at quarters.
Yes, so the shoppable bar, which I did not find to be as it didn't live up to my expectations of what it was. It was a beautiful space. We'll talk about like some of the things we did like about it, but it was definitely one of those experiences where I have quite a good imagination, and my imagination went a little wild, and maybe the PR went a bit wild too. And there were a few experiences that we also did beyond the you
Yes.
and I did that I wanted to kind of pull in. So we had the Gap, right?
Yeah, the Gap Studio. So Zach Boden's studio. Othership was
Right.
amazing.
Othership is
Yeah.
a contrast therapy location in New York, like super interesting, gets into the whole NA space in an interesting way, so non-alcoholic space, but also into wellness and, you know, a lot of themes that I talk about in the letter all the time. So definitely want to bring that in.
Yeah. And then a great shout out to our team, Jerry, Derek, and Belle. Be sure to check.
Yes, and then yeah, and we got some headshots done. So we talked about sort of,
Yes.
I don't know if we'd classify that,
Andy
but that was
Jackson.
a brand experience.
Oh,
Yeah,
he's
Andy Jackson.
amazing experience and amazing photographer.
Yes, yes, that you should go check out if you don't know his work. You'd be highly impressed, and just a genuinely lovely person to work with. So
Yeah, truly.
now that we've given you a recap of all the things that we did in New York, and I just want to remind you that we did these in 2 days. Um, all of the one up until quarters in one day, and then we did the others in one day too. But tell me what the big themes were for you, that kind of stood out for you, and then let's unpack them a bit.
Yeah, and it just really want to like express what a special kind of experience this was and is, right? And this is typically how we will travel. Is there's a lot of research that you do ahead of time going into all of these places, curating the list, and then we're really able to kind of figure out geographically wise, is that proper English? And then really go through and experience it and really be in the moment and really understand kind of the various experiences. And that's great. And we've obviously talked a lot since. And there are some themes that are absolutely bubbling up. Intentional. The experiences that we loved and really felt and bought things from and really see growing and doing well were all really intentional. And you could see that through everything that they do. Second is really about everything is now the consumer journey.
Yeah.
Third, retail renaissance.
Yes, I think that's a big theme.
Respecting the consumer, and I would even say adoring the consumer.
Also, not pigeonholing the consumer or expecting them to be not as big and as interesting as they really are.
And then the last one is really about getting out of your silo and really about the collaboration and the energy and building off of what other people saw and kind of that shared experience. And we both know you were traveling last week and I'm traveling now, like going and experiencing that and then coming back always brings you a fresh perspective.
Yeah, and for me, like it was this fresh perspective of everybody that was involved in it, but I think it was also very fascinating, and we can talk about this more at the end, of like how interested people were in different categories. I think as we get into kind of work and all of these things, like people silo themselves. And I think that people are now realizing that being like a kind of an expert is important, but like having this broader understanding of culture is really interesting. So I want to kind of talk about why I think brands need to be doing that, and not just brands, but people who work at brands, and that it's how consumers behave, which I think is
For sure.
actually the more interesting piece.
Yeah. All right.
So
well, let's get into it.
Let's dive in. Yeah. Let's talk about intentionality, because you were big on this as a theme when we were chatting about this and like reviewing and thinking about how we wanted to do this podcast. You kept saying intentional. It was so intentional. It was so intentional. She was like the bird in the background. Like she was just going on and on and on. So tell me what you mean by it was intentional, and tell me who did it well.
It was really as a strategy. So it wasn't, I think in the past, it's been like, oh, well, kind of this will be the intention for this experience or this store, or we want to do this. It was thought kind of more in parts and pieces. And we started, and I think the experience, probably best example of this was Printemps
Yeah.
In really understanding, and obviously there's so many years and so much planning that's gone into this really beautiful store. Um, but it's really about really even from the get-go of how they were launching and the level of expectation. I think you brought up a great example in our conversation as far as, there are so many stores that, oh no, you can't come in and use the bathroom. Oh, you can't come in if you're this age. Oh, we don't want you to do this. And Printemps was so welcoming, and down to the level of design that they used in their bathrooms was saying, no, we expect that you're going to be at this great level as a consumer, and our intention is throughout every single touch point we're going to be really intentional about it, be really thinking about, this is what we want you to experience through the dressing rooms, through the bathrooms, through the cafe, through the welcoming of it, through the store experience, through the social media. All parts and pieces were really tying together that intention.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that the other, there were a couple of examples in the letter that I think kind of tie into this theme. And the first one I would say after Printemps, which I 100% agree with, is 12 Matcha. So 12 Matcha, they've only been open a few weeks, but you can tell that the way that they thought through the consumer journey, minus maybe the line, but the line was not their doing. So I think it's, there could be improvements there, but there's an enormous line outside of the store that is an opportunity, and we've talked about that before. But once you're inside the store, everything about that experience, so you go in, it's it's a matcha shop. It could be really basic, right? I mean, most are. But you go in and you order, and then every time, when it's your order, they call your name up and you go up to the counter and they make it in front of you and they show you this really beautiful way of making matcha. There's this really beautiful charcoal water that they explain to you why the charcoal water is the perfect pH for the matcha. They do that whole process. Then you can go downstairs and taste it, but you can also watch these different classes happening on actually tasting like high grade matcha. It's just really thoughtful, and I would say that they put a lot of effort into training their staff. And their staff was genuinely nice. I don't know if they're just happen to be nice people and they're, lucking out, let nice people hire nice people, but everybody was really friendly, sharing a restaurant recommendation. And I think that even that, the hiring felt really intentional. And it could have just been, blank street coffee, we're rolling it out and we're making great matcha, and they could have been loud in a really different way. But actually, the process felt really slow and beautiful and intentional.
Totally. And I think that's a great example of the intentionality. It's intentionality as a strategy. You could tell and you could feel that as a consumer. You would go wait in line, you would pay, which wasn't kind of extraordinary other than they kept the line long because they wanted space within the experience itself, and so it didn't feel too cluttered, too kind of overrun like a Starbucks. And then they would call your name and you would walk over, and they were making this matcha. I love that I do this every time. They were making this matcha, mixing it, stirring it, even the milk specifically for you. And there was such an intention, and you could really feel that as a consumer in every part of it. And I think it's a great example. And to your point, the employees, they could have been like, oh, let's get the top of the top baristas, creating this great store, creating this great brand. I think typically that's been enough. But what they did is took it to the next level and said, no, 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 we're going to take that intention all the way through. We want somebody, eye contact is important. We want you to feel that you as the barista or whatever they're calling them are making them specifically for this customer, and have kind of that connection piece and explain that. And you really, as a consumer, you really, really felt that.
Yeah, and the matcha was delicious.
Oh, so delicious.
Really good. I think the other
Yes.
prime example that I would put on this list was Othership. So I think Othership is doing intentional really, really well. When you go, so Othership is the contrast therapy place, and when you go in, you meet with, again, really nice staff who are genuinely excited if it's your first time. It was our first time there, and they were stoked. They were like, you're gonna love it. They give you these two towels. The two towels are two colors. There's no point to the two colors, but it's interesting, visually. Yeah, I think visually is interesting. It's not everybody got two, and they were two different colors. And you go in the changing area. The changing area was not such a crazy experience, but the saunas and the cold plunges, what I thought was really intentional and beautiful was that we went to a guided experience, right? So you're going in and you're in the sauna, and there was a guide there, and they're telling you, like, this is why we're dropping this aromatherapy in, and this is what we want you to kind of be thinking about, and this is an opportunity for you to kind of like address these things in yourself. And then they did a sound, like this one happened to be a sound bath journey. So they did like different sound baths per aromatherapy. Then everybody went into the cold plunge, which is like, if you've, so I just read today that they have the coldest cold plunge that is not like industrial and private in the whole of the US or something. It's like, it was really cold. I mean, I was
It was cold
dying.
AF. Yeah.
I was really dying. But they're like telling you the whole time, they're like, okay, like we're here for 3 minutes, like you're at the 1 minute mark, like, drop in, be in your, like, you can do this. Like they're helping you kind of go through this really challenging thing to do. And you're all collectively doing it together. And then you come out and you do a little bit more sauna, and it's just like, everything about it felt, they have these different taps with like tea or water, and water at different temperatures. Like they just have a lot of really thoughtful detail, and you could tell like it's like they really thought through every moment of the journey. And even down to, I mentioned this in the newsletter, they have a signature scent. And they obviously used the signature scent at one point, talked about what the signature scent was about. And then when you come out into the lobby, you can buy the signature scent. So it's just like, it's all like weaves together. They also do a lot of, we went at 8 a.m. and did this sound bath one, but they also have raves that they do in the evenings and things like that. And they talk a lot about like the NA, like non-alcoholic, like spaces to hang out that are non-alcoholic. And even that is so intentional to me. It's like
Mm-hmm.
saying like, hey, this, you could just think of this place as a contrast therapy place, right? Like it's like, it could just be New York's best contrast therapy. Like that could be their position. But they're saying, no, like actually we want to be a venue for like communal experiences that aren't centered around alcohol. Great. Like what a like way to position it. Like I just think it's really interesting. Like the way that they've done everything is really cool.
Yeah, yeah. I was so impressed with that experience. And I think you're absolutely right. Like how giddy the check-in people were when we got there. They were so excited that we were experiencing it for the first time. And again, you could feel that. They didn't just post an ad of like, hey, we want to get retail people that have done this before, and here's the hourly rate and blah, blah, blah. They obviously looked for people that were like, hey, we want you to be passionate about this. We want you to embody this. We want this to be exciting for you. We want this to be, kind of a passion of yours. And they found that. And when they would put in the different scents, and they would explain when we're actually in the sauna, when they would put in the different scents, our guides, and they would explain what's about to happen within that aromatherapy, the way that they would move in choreography with together, the towels was just so ceremonial within that. And that really made a difference. It used to be like, yeah, the details. But I think what we're seeing now is intention from the very beginning, really as a strategy, and then all the way through within those details is really creating the experience.
Yeah. So I would say, like, if you're in a space where you're creating a brand now, like, I would, you could call it intentionality. You could call it world building. Like, like when you're in Printemps, like, there is a world building aspect to that. The fact that they partnered with Substackers, like a lot of Substackers and a lot of influencers before. So you got this really like immersive like view into it, FOMO view into it, that is very different to kind of how I've seen other retail places like say, oh, we have a new location. Like they really like kind of invited people in and gave them previews, but in this very cool and like interesting way. Then they have all of these different rooms, and each room feels like a little world. Like they have a whole hospitality thing. Like, so it's not just about retail, it's really about you spending time there. There's just a lot of world building, I think, in different ways in each of these examples. And I think it's
Mhm.
that it's intentional, but it's also, like the strategy is like an intentional world that you've
Yes.
made, right? Like every single thing feels like, oh, like this is additive, not an afterthought. Like, and I would say the counterexample to that, which I enjoyed the Gap, but I would say that that was kind of the like, if you want to compare those experiences, there were things that were happening at the Gap where you're like, they had that genesis of the idea, but they didn't think through the world that they were making. They just made a retail store. And there were moments where you could have been taken into this, Gap Studio, Zach Posen world and seen it, that were just completely missed for
Yeah.
me anyway.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that moves us into our second point, which is that everything is now the consumer journey. And I think building off of Gap Studio, which was cool to see, felt a little bit different. I got the shirt, bought a couple things. But it was really about, I agree, like you could see that they had it on paper of everything that they wanted to be, but really the execution of that. Oh, let's include books and, some items and things that we think are to create more of a lifestyle, which they had, but they had it kind of set in a corner. The experience of the dressing rooms was definitely meh, both from a lighting standpoint, design standpoint. They could have done something, we were talking about in our earlier conversations, they had this iconic photography. And they could have taken that and done that in a more experienced way to really show you, yes, they're this iconic brand, but we're also going to build it into the experience. The denim bar was there, but what's the next version of the denim bar? How are they kind of the go-to example that everybody's looking at? Hey, did you see Gap's denim bar? There are so many opportunities where they could have taken it to that level, but on paper, I think, they check the boxes. And I think that's the difference of what we're seeing today, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I didn't feel like when you went, like we talked about, there was this really cool wall of like iconic photos, right? And like it was a great wall. But then when it could have been in the like when you went into the changing fitting area, like maybe some version of that wall was also there so that you saw yourself as part of like this iconic continuum, right? Of like there was all these like iconic photographs from like Gap of years of old, and they're just great photos, and you want to be part of that. Like that's why we're going to the Gap. Like we all want to be part of that legacy, but then they miss kind of the details of it, or like the fact that the mannequins were like, hey, it's like here's this dress, and we're hearing this dress, and it's like, yeah, like okay, so I see the dress in two places, so I know the dress is special to you, right? But it wasn't styled. It wasn't interesting. It had no perspective. And so, like at Printemps, like even the mannequins were a moment of world building where they were really showing you like who the person is that you could become if you shopped at Printemps, right?
Exactly.
And
Well
so
said.
I think it's just like all of these different, yeah, like even the dressing rooms at Printemps, like each dressing room is different, but each dressing room was made for exactly the consumer. Like every moment in that store was the Instagram wall. And I think you said like it used to be a brand would have an Instagram wall. I think that, for example, like maybe that iconic wall in the Gap is sort of that wall, but not really quite. But it's like you used to have an Instagram wall. No, no, no. Like the whole thing is the Instagram wall now. And I think Printemps really is an example of, to me, like a trend that we talked about at the beginning of the year, where I said, I really think like we've seen the kind of re-rise of experiential, but where I really see experiential going is coming back into store. And to me, that's what Printemps is a great example of, is like they see that the consumer journey is like, it's not like, oh, like we have great windows, check. Oh, we have, like everything is like a disparate idea. They really see the consumer journey as every single moment should be a moment where you want to share content, that you're inspired, that there's part of the story, like that you really, the whole world is made for the journey, right?
Yeah, I think that's really, really well said. And I think I want to go back to what you were talking about with the mannequin, because I think that's a really good example. Because we look at other stores, Double RL being a great example, Printemps being a great example of, you really are looking not just like, oh, okay, that's how it would look like on a body. No, it's not that. It's way beyond that, and it's both an opportunity and an expectation, right? It's, you are now really responsible to create and have the opportunity to really create this world and show somebody, inspire somebody to be this, versus just show them what it would look like on a hanger. And the Gap, I think, has such an opportunity with Zach's styling, with his ability to like add some zhuzh to it, like add some things where you're like, oh, that's rad. That's just a red dress on the hanger, but on there with that, like I want to be her, and
Yeah.
really creating
I
that.
think, yeah. Alex Mill did that well, I thought.
Hmm.
They didn't do it on mannequins. They did it like as a face out with like, like a styling on the hanger and like, it was put together. Um but I think they did that in a really like in a more traditional retail way than say Printemps, but really took you like when you were in there, you felt like you could like create a capsule, but like you weren't going to be this like same boring person, and you were going to like kind of you could kind of navigate that store, and every single touch point had a purpose to it. Like, and even Mickey spoke to that. He was like, I want you to come in here, and when you see this scarf that I actually bought before he told me to buy it, so I was like, good. It's like I want you to think of that and then look at that and then be like, oh, like everybody gravitates to the scarf because it's the first, like it's kind of unique and different, but then you see it and you could see how it would make this one jacket that could become a staple in your closet really special and interesting on one day, right? So it's like just the way that they are working through kind of some of these problems of like how do people really shop versus like, oh, like here's your like color story section or whatever it is that you want to do in kind of traditional retail.
Totally. And I think it's only going to become more important. And we'll hit on this in a little bit with regards to AI, because you have to inspire people to want to come to a store, right? You have to inspire them to want to come in and see and experience it. And I think much like lines that you and I talk a lot about, it's such an opportunity. And I think more and more going to become really a responsibility for a brand to do that. So now is the opportunity to get in and say, like, what more can you be doing? How can you really take that to the next level? Because ultimately it's going to lead to sales. Oh, okay, well, we have this red dress, but it's out with a scarf, and here's a cool belt that's on it, and it's done a certain way. Well, I want all the things.
Right. Yeah. And I think in a very different way, just to kind of pull in two other examples from the letter, like I think Telfar was doing something really interesting in consumer journey in a very different way. So their store is like so conceptual, right? But it's every moment felt like you were part of a different aspect of the brand. They have this cool like digital wall where you're being surveilled, right? And there's obviously like Telfar is kind of to me the people's like luxury goods. So they're obviously speaking to kind of like this a whole big picture concept, but then you go back into the bag bar and then they're talking about where they are in Chinatown, and it's so interesting. Like you love the bag bar, so I think you should do the kind of retelling of it. But I think that it's so interesting.
It's so interesting. And I love both the confidence of this brand, the irreverence of this brand, the innovation of this brand. We always go, oh, there's nothing new in retail. We don't know what to do. Nothing's new. And you go into the store and everything's new. Everything feels like it's been completely rethought. And they're really showing what's new. And some of it, like, didn't work, might not be my personal taste, but it's really, you can't get away from the fact that it's really innovative and beautifully done. And the fact that it's such a high end brand, and they have this bag bar that you go in the back. Now, keep in mind, this is what, just, I don't know, Northwest, just south of Canal, right? So on the other side on Broadway. So it's like where everybody's coming up to you and like, hey, you want to buy a watch? You want to buy a bag? You want to buy this? And when they do that, they pop open this like, flyer that they have, or kind of this laminated piece of paper that shows you all the different Louis Vuitton bags or whatever it is that they're selling. And so Telfar has taken that to the next level. You go into this beautiful, you can see the image on the right, which is just really this super long image with kind of these great cutout rainbow colors of the different iconic bags and what's available. And they come in, 3 different sizes each or whatever it may be, but it's all driven by the aesthetic of kind of this, lo-fi canal street. But they've taken that kind of very iconic, but not very high end design element, and they've really elevated it. And I 100% here for it and absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think even the psych and how like they have a big photography psych, like it's just really interesting. They take you into their brand. Again, it's world building, but it's done in a really like for them way, and it's different to them. And I think it's just like the expectation now of consumers is that every single brand will do that for you. And it's not just in retail, right? Like it was done in food and bev. I think, like every single experience that we did that was great, like even Tiny Zaps is an
Yeah, I was just
example
thinking
of a
that.
consumer journey that really like is raising the bar of expectations, and like they really taking, again, it's like intentional, the theme of intentional, but it's also through the consumer journey of intentional, right? Like when you go to Tiny Zaps, like you book online, it's very approachable, which is not typical, I believe, for like tattoo studios.
Exactly.
Then you have this really cool like library of flash tats that they've worked with all of these illustrators on. So they've thought that through. And there's kind of like a little bit of a style for everyone, like while it still feels like them, like it's like a little bit like, oh, this one's more hand drawn and this one's more perfect and this one's more fine. And like there's a little bit for everybody and like different styles. And then the way that the person checks you in and they print out all of these different things. And I've been with you to like get many tattoos, not my own, your
Most of them,
tattoos.
yes.
And they like print them out, and then you inevitably are like, that's the wrong size, and then they go back and print you another one, and then you're like, a little bit in between, and then they go back and print you another one, and this time they like, I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've done this, but this place, like they print all the different size, like 3 different size. They kind of like ask you in the beginning, like kind of roughly what size, and they are all small tattoos, so there's only so much, but they print all the different sizes, they cut it out, they have all these cool like the artists there who like do it are really rad and like approachable. And I saw like 3 4 first time tattoo people, and then 2 people who were like really into tattoos, I guess 3 people if I include you, and 4 if I include Belle. And like there were a bunch, so it's like it was interesting how it appealed to everybody. But again, they like really thought through the consumer journey and have raised the expectations. So now when you go to a regular tattoo studio, like your expectation is like, oh, it's changed, right? Like you're gonna be like, oh, this is not
100%.
quite as seamless.
Yeah. I mean, they really understand that they've taken, because you can't get around the steps of the consumer journey for a tattoo. You gotta pick the one, you gotta get the right size, you gotta try it on first, make sure, you gotta do all of those things. And then you have to like clean it up and do the aftercare. Like you've got to do all of those things, but they've taken apart the consumer journey and kind of in each aspect said, well, how can we make this really fun? How can we make this easier? How can we make this better? How can we, and you really feel that as the consumer. And it was so rad to see. And I'm so excited for their Kimpton collaborations, which makes so much sense.
Yeah. So they're working with Kimpton Hotels to do these series of pop-ups in various cities where they do tattoo studios that are like the tattoos will be like souvenirs for you for your trip, which is obviously like an incredibly intelligent way of viewing tattoos today, because I think that is how people really view their tattoos versus these like maybe some people are still getting like large works done, but like a lot of people are really viewing their tattoos like these little like timestamps and like reminders and things like that. So it's just really interesting that they're developing that. I would say the example in this scenario that I think is like the example where I had envisioned this like very incredible consumer journey at Quarters. And it was the one that sort of like, if it had been executed to the degree of my imagination, I think it might have been really, really, really incredible. It was a really beautiful space. I enjoyed my wine. I would, tell you if you're nearby, like if you want a good drink and you want some nice atmosphere and good lighting, like go get a drink there. But I wouldn't necessarily tell you, wow, the experience is really, really unique and you have to go for the experience, right? So in the PR that they did, they really referred to themselves as a shoppable bar. And so when I read that and wrote about that, my head was like, oh, you buy the table, you buy the glass, you buy your wine. And I saw it as like, when you did that, it's like, okay, this drink comes in this glass and it's going to be served with this like snack that maybe you could buy and this bowl that maybe you could buy. And you're sitting at this table with this unique chair and this unique lamp. And like, you could buy all of these and you're kind of given this table of contents essentially for this experience, which I think would have been incredible. The reality of it was that you went and it was a cool bar, and then there were glasses on some shelves, and there were some like lamps for sale in an area that you weren't allowed to sit in, and there were signs everywhere that said like you couldn't sit down, and they had some cool vintage pieces that you couldn't touch, and like it was beautiful, like a museum or like a regular like store that you feel like you can't touch anything in, but it wasn't like as integrated. The consumer journey was not as magical. I will say I did like that they took our bags and took our coats when we came. So like,
Rare in New York. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think, we were disappointed because of how you'd built it up. Like it was the thing you were most excited to see. And I
That
do
was
think that's a
literally
great,
the,
maybe you should
yeah.
talk to them. So reach out quarters if you want to chat. But I think that idea was great and we were really excited for that. But then I do think the consumer journey, like if you're selling a couch that says do not sit on, like it's never great. Like this again goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning as far as intentionality, and that there's just some stores that are like, no, we don't want kids of this age. We don't, you can't use our bathroom. You can't do this, versus kind of this very welcoming, like, come on, I think you're gonna rise to my expectation of you, and you're gonna do great.
Yeah.
That was
Well,
not the
that is
experience.
in our fourth point, which is
Yes,
like
I'm jumping
respect of
ahead.
the consumer. So don't jump ahead. But
No,
let's
no.
talk. I mean, we've talked a lot about retail renaissance, but like
Yes,
I I think it's still worth touching on some of the different experiences and thinking even like the McNally's, I think is a great interesting idea of retail renaissance.
for sure. But I think like that's a contrast to Alex Mill. You want to give, because I think your example at Alex Mill is a great one, and I think gives people both a little, insight into our experience, but also background into what we mean by retail renaissance and kind of, AI, as we often talk about.
Yeah. I mean, right. So, if you've listened to this podcast before and like you've read I read the newsletter at all, then you know that I'm paying a lot of attention to kind of AI and how I think that's going to transform retail. And I think there's a few fundamentals that I think are really, really important for people to understand as we, even today, so just yesterday, ChatGPT did roll out exactly what I predicted that they would roll out in exactly the same way that I said that they would, which is, I'm not saying like it's just we all knew this was coming. Like I'm just telling you about it. But like, now when you go on chat, you can say, hey, I'm looking for a blender and I need, or like my favorite example, I'm looking for some pans, some cooking pans. I really want to like buy the best. I need it to be affordable, good price point, but great value. Like I need it to last. All the things that you think in your head, right? You're going to just tell the AI that. And then it's going to go through the archive of like every single TikTok post, every single Reddit, every single like website, like your website, but everyone else's website to pull on all these different reviews, right? And then it's going to give you three little neat choices. And most likely, one of those choices will be a luxury, like not a luxury, a legacy brand, because they have so much history. And AI loves to present things that it can kind of trust, that it like knows you're gonna that, and it also gets to know you really well. So it's gonna maybe know, hey, I'm gonna present her one that's like a legacy brand that like is really trustworthy. I'm gonna present her one that's like, I know that she generally likes like kind of luxury goods, so I'm going to give her like one that's a little bit high end. And then I know Kirsten really likes color, so I'm going to give her ones that are colorful, right? Like it's going to know that about you and it's going to present. And that's the world we're living in. And the decision making that's going to happen there is that you're going to make a gut choice on that. You're not going to go and research those things again. You know that this thing just did better research than you could do in days. So you're just going to choose from one of those three, unlike you would typically do if you typed it into Google and you did like, hey, pans. You know that it's just going to give you a bunch of like gobbledygook and you're going to have to dive deep into it. But you know that the AI has done that deep dive for you. How are you going to make that decision? Who are you going to choose? It's probably going to present like Le Creuset for pan or whatever. And you're going to say, okay, like, yes, I like know that that's a good one and I've heard of it. And so brand awareness is going to become vastly more critical than it has been for a really long time, right? So like we were in this performance marketing ad era where it was just like flashy and like it's like, oh, like new, different, da 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 da. And that is actually going to kind of go away. And I think you're really going to see so much more like, okay, I'm choosing this one because it A suggested it to me and B I know it, right? So to me, like how that's gonna like how this kind of all ties back to what we did was when I was in Alex Mill, like I bought a pair of shoes, right? Like a really great pair of loafers. And
We love
they
those shoes. They're
partnered
great
with
shoes.
they are great shoes. And they worked with an Italian company, Sessa, who is like a legacy brand. So it has all the legacy. It's popular on TikTok with the like, if you know crowd of fashion people who will know that these like shoes are good quality and great leather, affordable price point, you know. And then they're adding the Alex Mill like kind of like lens on top of it, where it's like, hey, it's going to be in a great colorway, and it's going to be like a very curated view of that loafer, and it's not going to be all the styles of that loafer, because you know that that Italian company has a bunch of old styles that you don't actually want, but there are like 3 styles that you do want. And like that is going to work so well in the age of AI. Like it's going to be crazy. And it's not going to work well to just like, you know, do a Jacquemus Timberland like collaboration, which is interesting because it did, you know, I do kind of want a pair of lemon Timberland shoes.
Of
Like,
course.
but you know, that's more of a novelty thing. AI is not going to serve you up that recommendation, right? Like you'll see that and that'll be a different kind of buying experience. But like it's just a really interesting, I think that everybody thinks about kind of this retail or the when we say retail renaissance, but to me actually some of the fundamentals of retail are going to come back in such a big way. I think brand awareness is going to come back. I think really thoughtfully thinking about how to bring in legacy products with trust, with like good quality products is going to become really big. I think, you know, there's just a lot of fundamentals that are going to return to, I think, even just general brand experience as you want to not do AI, because your world will become full of it. You will want to hang out with people and spend time with people. And then we get into Othership and like spending time having matcha and actually spending time there, or going to McNally's and buying a book, and then spending time to like actually go to their new, like they have all these new events that they're doing and they're really tapped into that world, right? Like that's all going to bubble up.
Yeah.
Sorry, that
Yeah.
was long.
100%. 100%. I mean, I would going back to before we get to McNally's, um, I think I would argue that it's not just brand awareness, but it's brand strategy, because how are you informing AI what you're about? And I think brand strategy, we are moving away from performance marketing. Yes, brand awareness is going to be huge, but I think you're not even going to get there unless you really have a brand strategy. You really know your brand. You have the words to be able to inform AI of what that brand is about, what it does, kind of all of the parts and pieces. That is going to be even more important than ever. And I'm really excited for that because I think it helps in all of the things, but certainly will be there how you're going to get to the table in the first place.
Yeah, great. All right, should we move on to our 4th point of
Yes, yes,
respecting the consumer?
yes, yeah. I mean, I've weaved this throughout, and obviously, like I'm super passionate and really excited about it. But I'd love to hear kind of you kick us off in your take of how you saw this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a theme of like the ones that are doing it well are respecting your time, your behavior, the trust that you're giving. So I think there's that as a theme, which like we saw in the printemps, like again, you know, it's my whole spiel of like we went in that week to like 5 stores when I needed to pee, and I like every single person was like, no, we have no bathrooms for you. And it's like, dude, I'm in here buying like hundreds of dollars worth of goods, like just give me a bathroom to pee in. Like stop making me leave all of my goods on your table to go and find a bathroom. And Printemps is doing the exact opposite and like decking their bathrooms out with beautiful tile. And we know that everybody, if you know anything about hospitality, you know that like the bathroom at restaurants and hotels is like the number one spot that you share your selfie from. So like to have that mindset, to respect to sort of the consumer, but then to benefit from it by their behavior, right? So it's I think that that's a big theme that I think, you know, again, with 12 Matcha, I thought that that was true. I'm trying to think of like all the other ones. But the other theme of it, and then you can kind of tell me how you were feeling about it, was that it's sort of like what was I going to say? The respect of also how interesting your consumer is. When we were in Pauline, I saw the most revealing thing that I had seen. And I like don't even know how to weave this in here, but I think it belongs in this section of just like so when we were in Pauline, we were in there, and the most surprising gaggle of girls walks in with all of their addicted bags that I have been seeing all over Soho, right? And I was saying to somebody, I was like, I bet that Pauline does not have this person on their mood board, right? And I think it comes down to, again, respect, because like, I think that somebody like Pauline might, and I don't know this about them, so maybe they do have this person on their mood board, but it would be like, oh no, we're not for that girl, right? Like, we're not for the Gen Alphas who like buy addicted and like da 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 da. But the reality of how consumers are now is that, yes, she's a girl that buys addicted, but she's also a girl that really loves like beautiful bags and respects like kind of the quality of these things, and she lives in both of these like she is a consumer that lives in both of these worlds. And I think that we need to have a little bit more respect for how interesting people are, how diverse they are, how many interests they have, and also their behaviors, like just all across the board. I think like just refocusing the lens on loving your consumer, being excited by them, and what they do and what they represent, versus being like, oh, like we want to sell things to you, but we actually really don't like, which is most of what brand experience feels like these days.
Agreed and well said. You rise to the level of your expectations. Okay, fifth point, getting out of your silo and expertise really across the way.
Yeah, I think it was just really interesting. Like, the group of people that came on this trip, like, it was a really diverse, really cool group of people that all came from very different backgrounds, right? Like, we had some people who were from retail, we had some people who work in the finance sector, but in design, but like more in sort of a technical, like, or maybe even tech space within finance. We had, like a board person who works on a lot of boards, who's like, also has a CMO. So it was just like and we had a Substack writer, shout out to Byron, who was just lovely and like so cool to meet him. It was really rad. And I thought it was just really interesting that everyone kind of came with their unique perspective, and just the conversations that were had throughout the tour. Like, there were moments where, and maybe we should have had more pauses, because, I did pack in a lot in the day, but there were like opposite like opportunities, like in cabs and at Happier Grocer, where we stopped for lunch, that like for people to really connect. It was just really interesting to kind of hear how all these different people saw these different experiences and the value that they took out of the experiences. Even experiences like fascia flossing that maybe like on the surface, maybe like, there was a woman who was there who is like a very successful CMO, right? Like, but like really like had, like she's coming here to like work, right? And so she's like really like on the tour to like really learn the latest and greatest. But, was fascia flossing on her list of like must see experiences to like really understand culture? Probably not. But I assure you that when she left the fascia flossing, everybody who left the fascia flossing was like, this is a really interesting space. Like, they could see why it was going to be an emerging trend and why it would be big for each single different person, right? So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I thought that was great. And building off of that, like that person, I loved the way that she kind of came in and wasn't expecting that. It was obviously quite physical, wasn't dressed for that, but she really leaned into that. And, I love collaboration. And I think that was really shown of how when you just kind of jump into something as she did, and then the way that she inspired and affected other people, I thought was really beautiful, that then other people have a different perspective on it. They jump in too. Somebody said, oh, I have this particular injury. Can fascia flossing help me for this? And again, then another person was like, oh yeah, I have that same injury. Like, it's really building off of it. And I think coming off of COVID, knowing that experiences have been a thing, and now we're really all here for it. I think that's such an important part of every brand.
I think a lot of us in the group probably had an interest in, all have an interest in skincare and beauty, like so happens. But one of the things that was so cool about going into Senti Senti, which is this huge like Korean, it's not huge actually, it's tiny, but like a huge wealth of Korean skincare products, was just the sort of inspiration of that space. Like, what's happening in Korean beauty right now is so like they've really been pushing things. And I think there's just a increasing aware, not just like ingredients, but they're pushing formats. They're pushing like, there's like interesting things that you haven't heard of, like exosomes or like, powdered mass, because of like reconstituting them is better. Like there's just a lot of really interesting things. And one of the things that I felt like my takeaway was when I was talking to people, like people were like, I personally get a lot of inspiration off of the internet, right? Like obviously from all the work that I write about, but not everyone is that way. And I do a lot of, I do these tours for us all the time. So like I'm getting this level of inspiration, quarterly. And so many people were coming and just saying like, hey, like there is a different kind of inspiration and a different kind of energy giving inspiration that happens when you do things in person. And I think that to me, that's the power of these tours. And, where I see this kind of big picture going is like, it's not just sharing these, but it's sharing these so that you go and do them and you can experience these things for yourself. Because there is nothing like these, like doing things in person. And I think even better doing them with a group of people where the inspiration is kind of flowing, and it's just a really I think there's a lack of it right now, but there's also so much evidence to show that people really want it. The book clubs, the cookbook clubs, your Sunday your breakfast club, like even people going to conferences, South by Southwest becoming bigger again, like everything. People are screaming like for connection, for camaraderie, for inspiration in person. And I think it's such an opportunity for brands to be thinking about how can you provide that, but be thinking about whether or not your team needs these things too.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest push, is thinking about it from a brand and from a company standpoint, from a team standpoint. And we heard this from multiple people on the tour. We've heard this from other fans, and we know that that's such the opportunity. I mean, just being in Senti Senti and kind of, I started asking for all of the weird things I normally do. And then that unlocks things in other people to start to be like, oh, well, I've got this thing. And they were so knowledgeable in there and we're immediately on it. But it became this great energetic kind of collaboration of different people sharing things and finding things. And it can both be an inspiration and education from a cultural and kind of trend standpoint, but it can also be a bonding experience really within that, and a team building experience. And I think that's a big opportunity within these tours and beyond for companies to be doing.
Agreed. So, small plug, if you want to do this and you think that your team would value it, like we're here, we want to do these things with you, but also come on one of our next ones, where this is the beginning of something new for us, but we see doing a lot more of these. Berlin, Milan is on our list, Seoul is on our list. So if these are interesting to you, please reach out. We're in the process of figuring out the dates and, getting your input on like, hey, yeah, I want to be in Berlin. Like, let's do it in October. Tell us. Drop it in the comments. Yep. And also, if you did read the letter, tell us what your takeaways were and themes were in the comments. I'd love to kind of hear what's bubbling up for people, or even anything that you're seeing that ties into the themes that we talked about today.
Yes, would absolutely love to hear that. Can I give you a little rapid fire? You ready?
Yeah, let's wrap it up. You want to ask me some questions, some fun things?
I do. All right. First thing comes to mind. Favorite thing on the tour?
Well, it's a toss-up between fascia flossing and printemps. I really can't choose. But like those were real highlights for me. Real highlights.
Yes. Pretty great. All right. Biggest emerging opportunity. For me, the favorite thing on the tour was, again, printemps, but also hanging out with Mickey Drexler. Like, I'll do that any day.
Oh, true. That was really fun. And he's so lovely and so wise. Like, so much came from that conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, maybe we'll put biggest emerging opportunity. I think probably is fascia flossing. I'm like a fascia flossing evangelist. I think there's so much going on in the longevity space. And I would put the Othership in that group. I'd even put some of the things in Senti Senti in that group. I'd maybe even put the pH matcha thinking in that group. Like there's a lot of longevity in all of these, many of these things that we saw too. And I thought that that is a really big opportunity across category.
Yep. And I see it from a different lens of really the opportunity being about the intention. Like, look at your brand, look at your consumer experience, look at everything you're doing. And even the smallest things, the mannequin's a great example of that. Like that can really, really change the game. All right. If brands only took away one thing from everything that we talked about, all of the experience, all of the tour, what would it be?
World building. Do it right. Down to the towels.
Yes. And the way you wave the towels.
Yes.
Okay. The most insightful moment of the day.
To me, it was the Pauline addicted moment. Like seeing that consumer and just understanding that it's like the brand book muse is dead. Don't do it anymore. I don't want to see them in there anymore. I want to see you address the micro communities that exist and understand that your consumer is actually part of many micro communities, and that they're rich and interesting people, and you can't like just assume that your consumer is just one person, because it's like that's dead.
Yep. And for me, it was really around Printemps, that every single moment, including the bathrooms, was thought through, and that literally the consumer journey really is everywhere. And of course, let's end with the funniest moment.
Maybe when we got kicked out of quarters for having a camera crew. That was pretty funny. There was probably a lot. I mean, seeing somebody like strip down to their bra to do fascia flossing, that was pretty funny.
That was my favorite.
Yeah.
She was totally game for it and here for it and didn't skip a beat. I loved it.
Yeah. So funny. All right. This was fun. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to come on a tour with us, let us know. And until the next journey we go on.
Yeah. Stay curious, everybody.
Bye. That was it for this episode of Good Thinking. Don't forget to tune in next week.
If you found this valuable, subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast app.
And don't forget to read on Substack for even more insights.
And if you really liked it, drop us a heart. We'd love to hear from you.
Ciao. Until next time.